For a long time, it was believed that the human brain was essentially fixed after a certain age, that once we reached adulthood, the patterns of thought, behavior, and emotional response were hardwired and permanent. That view has now been thoroughly dismantled by neuroscience, the concept of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change itself in response to experience, is not a metaphor or a motivational phrase. It's a measurable biological fact. Neurons, the cells responsible for transmitting information in the brain, are not static. They form networks that are constantly shifting, pruning, and strengthening based on how we use them. When we engage in new experiences, learn new information, or even shift our internal narrative, those neurons respond by rewiring themselves. Dendrites, the branching structures on neurons that receive signals, grow and retract in response to stimulation. Synapses, the connections between neurons, either strengthen or weaken depending on how often they are used. This process happens throughout life, not just in childhood or early development. What's most powerful is that you can direct this plasticity deliberately. Through focused attention and repetition, you can cause specific neural circuits to strengthen. If you repeatedly practice a skill, whether it's learning a language, developing emotional regulation, or even building confidence, you are physically altering the wiring of your brain to make that pattern more likely to occur again. This is not just a psychological phenomenon. MRI and PET scans have shown actual structural changes in the brain after periods of deliberate learning or behavioral therapy. One of the critical factors in engaging neuroplasticity is attention. When you're deeply focused on a task, you're engaging neuromodulators like acetylcholine, which help mark the synapses involved as important. This flagging process tells the brain, "This matters, reinforce it." Over time, the brain begins to allocate more resources to those neural pathways, making the behavior or skill feel more automatic. This is the basis of both habit formation and behavioral change. Another essential component is error detection. The brain learns fastest when it senses a gap between what you intended to do and what actually happened. That discrepancy, often called a prediction error, releases neurochemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine that enhance plasticity. So while failure may feel uncomfortable, it is literally the trigger for the brain to begin remodeling itself. Sleep plays a major role in locking in those neural changes. During deep non-REM sleep, the brain replays sequences of neuronal activity experienced during the day. This consolidation process reinforces the circuits that were activated while awake. If you're trying to rebuild yourself, whether cognitively, emotionally, or physically, sleep isn't a luxury, it's part of the process. Without it, the gains you make during waking efforts simply don't stick. It's also important to recognize that plasticity works both ways. Just as the brain can rewire itself for growth, it can also adapt to negative patterns. Habits of anxiety, distraction, or self-sabotage can become ingrained if practiced repeatedly. The key is to become aware of which neural pathways you're reinforcing, moment by moment. Stress, often seen in a negative light, is actually an essential physiological response that, when managed correctly, can drive personal growth, performance, and resilience. While chronic, unmanaged stress can have detrimental effects on both the body and mind, acute stress, experienced in controlled doses, can be a catalyst for profound transformation and development. To understand this, we need to first look at what stress actually is. At its core, stress is a biological response to a perceived challenge or threat. This response is mediated by the sympathetic nervous system, which triggers the release of hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones prepare the body for fight or flight, enhancing alertness, increasing heart rate, and redirecting blood flow to muscles. In short, the body is gearing up to face an immediate challenge. This acute stress response is adaptive. It was evolutionarily designed to help us deal with short-term threats, whether running from danger or fighting for survival. But in the modern world, the threats we face are often not life-threatening. Deadlines, public speaking, difficult conversations, and even personal goals can trigger the same physiological response. What's fascinating is that when experienced in manageable doses, this stress response can actually enhance cognitive performance and physical ability. When stress is experienced in short bursts, it activates neuroplasticity. the brain's ability to adapt and change. In particular, stress activates the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, focus, and planning. With the right amount of stress, our cognitive capacities are heightened, and we become sharper, more focused, and more capable of solving complex problems. In fact, research shows that stress enhances memory and learning by increasing the release of neurochemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine, which improve attention and information retention. Furthermore, stress encourages physiological adaptation. When the body faces physical stress, whether through exercise, fasting, or other challenging experiences, it is forced to adapt. This is why progressive overload is so effective in exercise regimens. The body breaks down and rebuilds stronger under stress. The same principle applies to mental and emotional challenges. When we push ourselves to face stressful situations, we build resilience. Each time we confront and overcome a challenge, we essentially train our bodies and minds to cope with higher levels of stress in the future, making us more capable of handling adversity. One of the key factors that determine whether stress is constructive or harmful is recovery. Just as muscles need time to repair and grow after a workout, the body and brain need recovery periods after stressful experiences. Without adequate rest, continuous stress can lead to burnout, decreased performance, and negative health outcomes. But when balanced with proper recovery, whether through sleep, relaxation techniques, or downtime, stress can serve as a powerful tool for personal growth. During recovery, the body and brain process the stress response, strengthening the pathways that were activated and building resilience for future challenges. Moreover, the way we perceive stress plays a significant role in determining its impact. Studies have shown that individuals who view stress as a challenge rather than a threat experience better outcomes. This mindset shift activates different brain areas, promoting a more adaptive response to stress. Instead of feeling overwhelmed or helpless, we see the stress as an opportunity for growth, which primes the brain to respond more effectively. Our daily habits are far more than just routines. They are the architects of who we become. The idea that our identity is shaped by what we repeatedly do is rooted in neuroscience and psychology. Every action, no matter how small, reinforces neural pathways in the brain, sculpting our behaviors, thoughts, and ultimately, our self-perception. Over time, these habits become the foundation of our identities, making them powerful tools for personal transformation. At the core of this process lies the brain's concept of neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Each time we engage in a behavior, we strengthen the neural circuits that are responsible for that action. In essence, our habits become the repeated firing of neurons that reinforce the brain's wiring. The more consistent and intentional these behaviors are, the more ingrained they become in our neural structure. In fact, our brain literally begins to expect these behaviors and the associated thoughts and feelings, which then become a part of who we are. Habits, however, are not just about the behaviors themselves. They are about the context in which they occur. The environment, emotional state, and even the time of day all influence the habits we form. This means that our daily habits can either support or undermine the person we want to become. For instance, if you start each day with a 10-minute meditation, over time, you are not only cultivating a practice of mindfulness, but also reshaping how you relate to stress, focus, and emotions. This habit influences not just your mental state in the moment, but also alters your default response to life's challenges. The power of habits lies in their ability to compound. What might seem like a small action in the moment can have profound long-term effects. Think about a habit as simple as brushing your teeth. It's a routine that, over the course of a lifetime, directly impacts your oral health, but it also reinforces a pattern of care and discipline. This simple act becomes an integral part of your identity as someone who values hygiene and well-being. Similarly, a habit like exercising for 30 minutes a day doesn't just improve physical health, but also fosters an identity of someone who prioritizes fitness, discipline, and self-care. The most profound shifts in identity happen when we change the narrative we tell ourselves about our habits, the way we view our actions. Whether we see them as burdens or as empowering choices determines how deeply they shape us. A person who identifies as a morning person will likely find it easier to wake up early because the identity is already tied to the action. The belief that I am a healthy eater makes the decision to choose nutritious food an extension of who they are, not just a one-off behavior. Therefore, when you want to rebuild or transform yourself, you must start by looking at your habits as the building blocks of your identity. There's also a biological aspect to how habits reshape us. Every time we make a decision to act, the brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. This release creates positive reinforcement, which strengthens the neural circuits involved in the behavior. The more we engage in a habit, the more dopamine is released, making it easier to repeat the behavior. Over time, these rewards not only make the habits feel more automatic, but also further cement the identity associated with those actions. In this way, repetition is key. The brain doesn't respond to a single action, but rather to the consistency and repetition of those actions over time. This repeated engagement reconfigures both the structure and function of the brain, making the habit more ingrained and automatic. Vision and focus are not just cognitive functions. They are the guiding forces that shape our neurochemistry and, by extension, our daily lives and long-term outcomes. The brain is an incredibly adaptive organ, and the way we direct our attention can have profound effects on our emotional states, cognitive capabilities, and even our overall well-being. What we focus on determines not only our behavior in the moment, but also influences the neurochemical environment of the brain, creating the foundation for how we experience and respond to the world around us. When we focus our attention on something, whether it's a task, a goal, or even a particular emotion, the brain releases specific neurotransmitters, chemical messengers that regulate mood, cognition, and behavior. The most prominent of these neurochemicals are dopamine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. These chemicals are not just products of random brain activity, they are directly tied to the focus and vision we set for ourselves. For example, when we focus intently on a task or challenge, the brain increases the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with motivation, pleasure, and reward. Dopamine helps us stay engaged with a goal, reinforcing behaviors that are aligned with that goal. This is why when you're working on something that excites you, it feels rewarding and fulfilling even if the task is difficult. Dopamine not only keeps you motivated to continue, but also helps in consolidating the learning that occurs during this focused effort. The more you focus on a specific task, the stronger the dopamine system becomes, which creates a self-perpetuating loop. Focus produces dopamine, and dopamine strengthens focus. Similarly, norepinephrine, which is linked to alertness and attention, plays a crucial role in how focus directs neurochemistry. Norepinephrine is released when we experience stress, but not the negative, overwhelming kind. Acute, controllable stress, like the stress of an approaching deadline or an intense challenge, releases norepinephrine, which sharpens attention, heightens awareness, and primes the brain for quick thinking and problem solving. It allows us to stay alert and react effectively to the environment. In fact, the optimal level of norepinephrine is crucial for maintaining focus on complex tasks. Too little of it can result in distractibility and sluggishness, while too much can lead to anxiety and burnout. Acetylcholine, another critical neurotransmitter, is released when we engage in tasks that require sustained concentration. It plays a role in learning, memory, and attention, especially in tasks that demand the brain to concentrate on fine details or complex sequences. When we focus deeply on a subject or project, acetylcholine increases the efficiency with which the brain processes information, helping to strengthen neural connections related to that task. This makes learning more efficient, and it's why deep, undistracted focus allows us to grasp new concepts and develop skills faster. The relationship between vision, focus, and neurochemistry is also seen in the role of mental imagery. The brain doesn't differentiate well between actual experience and vivid mental imagery. When we visualize our goals or outcomes, we engage the same neural pathways that would be activated if we were actively working toward them. This process can release dopamine and other reward-related neurochemicals, even in the absence of actual external rewards, making it a powerful tool for motivation and goal setting. Furthermore, focus also affects the brain's ability to filter out irrelevant information. This is managed by the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for higher, order cognitive functions like decision making, planning, and self-regulation. When we train ourselves to focus, the prefrontal cortex becomes more efficient at managing distractions, allowing us to concentrate deeply on what truly matters. This cognitive filtering is essential not just for performance, but also for maintaining emotional regulation and mental clarity, as it minimizes the impact of distractions that could otherwise derail our progress. Sleep is often viewed as a luxury or a simple biological necessity, something we do when we have time or when we're exhausted. However, sleep is far more than just a break from wakefulness. It is an active, complex process essential for mental and physical restoration, memory consolidation, and emotional balance. Sleep and recovery are non-negotiable aspects of any process aimed at rebuilding or improving oneself. Without these essential components, any progress made in cognitive, emotional, or physical domains can be severely undermined. The importance of sleep begins with its role in memory consolidation. During deep sleep, particularly in non-REM stages, the brain processes and solidifies the information and experiences we have encountered throughout the day. This period of consolidation strengthens the neural connections that were activated during waking hours, turning short-term memories into long-term ones. Without sleep, the brain is unable to integrate new learning properly, and much of the information we encounter fails to be retained effectively. This is why consistent, high-quality sleep is crucial for anyone trying to learn new skills, retain knowledge, or make lasting changes. Sleep is also vital for emotional regulation. During the sleep cycle, especially during rapid eye movement REM sleep, the brain processes emotional experiences and regulates mood. REM sleep helps to integrate emotional experiences with cognitive understanding, allowing the brain to make sense of emotional reactions and regulate stress responses. Chronic sleep deprivation, on the other hand, has been linked to heightened emotional reactivity, reduced capacity for empathy, and increased susceptibility to negative emotions such as anxiety and depression. A lack of sleep weakens the brain's ability to handle emotional challenges effectively, creating a cycle of stress and emotional dysregulation that makes personal growth more difficult. Physical recovery is another critical aspect of sleep. During deep sleep stages, the body initiates processes of cellular repair and tissue growth. For example, muscle tissue is repaired and rebuilt after physical exertion, making sleep essential for those involved in physical training, exercise, or rehabilitation. Growth hormone, which plays a key role in muscle repair, is released predominantly during sleep, particularly during slow, wave sleep. Without adequate sleep, the body's ability to repair itself and recover from physical stress is impaired, leading to a greater risk of injury, fatigue, and decreased performance over time. Moreover, sleep is integral to brain detoxification. The brain is uniquely equipped with a waste clearance system called the glymphatic system, which is more active during sleep. This system clears metabolic byproducts, including potentially toxic substances like beta-amyloid, which has been associated with neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. During sleep, cerebrospinal fluid is pumped more efficiently through the brain, washing away these toxins and preventing the buildup of harmful proteins that could otherwise disrupt cognitive function. Sleep, therefore, plays a crucial role in preserving long-term brain health and preventing cognitive decline. The role of sleep in neuroplasticity, or the brain's ability to adapt and form new neural connections, cannot be overstated. Just as physical recovery enables the body to grow stronger, sleep enables the brain to grow more flexible and resilient. New learning experiences, whether intellectual, emotional, or physical, require sleep to be effectively integrated into the brain's architecture. Without sufficient recovery, the brain's ability to adapt to new experiences and challenges is limited, hindering personal growth and the development of new skills. Recovery also extends beyond just sleep to include the concept of rest and downtime during waking hours. Chronic overwork, constant mental stimulation, and emotional exhaustion can overwhelm the brain's ability to function optimally. Recovery from these stresses isn't just about physical rest, but also mental and emotional respite, allowing the nervous system to reset. Activities like deep relaxation, mindfulness, and taking breaks throughout the day contribute to the overall process of restoration, ensuring that the brain and body remain capable of high performance when they are needed most. In our culture, we often hear the phrase, "I'll start when I'm motivated," or "I just need to feel inspired." The belief that motivation must come first before action is deeply ingrained in the way we think about personal growth and achievement. However, research in neuroscience and behavioral psychology shows that action precedes motivation, and in fact, taking the first step is often the key to generating the drive necessary to continue moving forward. This idea flips the conventional wisdom on its head and emphasizes the importance of starting before you feel ready. The human brain's reward system, primarily driven by the neurotransmitter dopamine, plays a central role in this process. Dopamine is often associated with pleasure and motivation, but its role is more nuanced. Dopamine is released not only when we achieve a goal or reach a milestone, but also when we initiate a task or engage in an activity. This release of dopamine is the brain's way of marking an action as important, reinforcing the behavior and motivating us to continue. In other words, taking action is the trigger for motivation, not the other way around. When you start a task, even if you don't feel particularly motivated, you activate the release of dopamine, which in turn propels you forward. This principle can be understood in terms of commitment devices, small actions or decisions that create momentum. When we commit to doing something, even in a minimal way, our brain starts to lock in on the behavior, making it easier to continue. For instance, setting a goal to exercise for just 5 minutes a day, or starting a writing task by writing one sentence, lowers the threshold for action. Once you begin, you'll often find that motivation follows naturally. The brain, once it's set into motion, finds it more difficult to stop, especially when the action is perceived as rewarding, even in the smallest sense. This concept is tied to the idea of activation energy, a term used to describe the initial energy required to start a process. Once you push past that initial resistance, the brain becomes more efficient at continuing the action. In fact, research has shown that our brains are wired to conserve energy by minimizing effort. It's the very act of beginning that triggers the neurochemicals and neural pathways necessary to keep going, which is why action becomes easier and more automatic once you've started. Another critical element is the power of habit. Regular, small actions taken consistently over time build neural pathways that make future actions easier. When you repeatedly take action, even in the absence of strong motivation, your brain begins to adapt and anticipate the action as part of a routine. This is how habits are formed, and habits are the key to long-term success. When a task becomes habitual, it no longer requires significant motivation or willpower to complete because it has already become ingrained in your brain's wiring. This process is also deeply connected to emotional regulation. Often, the reason we delay action is due to emotional resistance, feelings of doubt, fear, or discomfort, but action itself can help to regulate these emotions. The simple act of doing something, however small, distracts the mind from the negative emotions holding us back and shifts our focus toward progress. This shift in attention is particularly important for dealing with anxiety or procrastination, where the anticipation of starting feels worse than the task itself. By taking action, even without motivation, we often find that our anxiety decreases and our focus improves, creating a positive feedback loop that propels us forward. Finally, self-discipline is strengthened through this process of action before motivation. Each time we act without waiting for the perfect moment of inspiration, we reinforce the ability to take initiative. This is crucial in situations where motivation is fleeting or external conditions aren't ideal. By learning to act regardless of how we feel, we develop the discipline necessary to achieve long-term goals, reinforcing the idea that we don't need to wait for motivation. We can create it ourselves through action. In conclusion, rebuilding yourself is a dynamic process grounded in the principles of neuroplasticity, stress management, daily habits, focus, recovery, and action. Your brain is constantly adapting, and by taking deliberate action, cultivating positive habits, and embracing controlled stress, you can reshape both your mind and body. Sleep and recovery are crucial for sustaining progress, while focus directs the neurochemical environment that fuels motivation. Remember, action sparks motivation. It's not something that comes first. By understanding and leveraging these principles, you can continuously evolve, creating a stronger, more resilient version of yourself, ready to face any challenge.